welcome everyone. My name is Lori Bambaco. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm board certified as a specialist in oncology nutrition. This is the first ever hybrid program I've ever done in my life. So bear with me. Today we're going to get through it. We're going to have a very lovely time together learning, and for those who are here, getting to try some of the foods that I might recommend. For everyone who has registered, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that I will be presenting in just a moment. I'm going to share my screen to do that. And then I'm going to move it over to the kitchen. So it's sort of like a dual program. And I'm just making sure everyone is admitted so we get everyone in on time. And then we're going to do some recipes in the kitchen, which is a lot of fun. I wish you all could be here with me so that you can try some of these out, but you will also get copies of the recipes as well. We do have the chat box open, so please do drop some questions or comments as I go through the PowerPoint presentation, but I do plan to have some time at the end to allow for some additional questions and comments that you might have. If you can hear me okay, that makes me happy, but with this mask and with a lot of talking without taking a sip of water, you might not be able to hear me that well. So if that is the case, just drop a note in the chat and Savina will kind of give me the little cue off camera that I need to speak up. Okay, so I will share my screen now, and I have a PowerPoint presentation as I shared, and then I'll see you in a moment. This is so exciting. Thank you for being here. This might be a little bit of a challenge, it's hybrid, yeah. And we're gonna, but hopefully it's just one of many that we're gonna be able to do. Yeah, we're excited to do it. It's a beautiful day. Right? Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to present my PowerPoint for everyone to see. Okay, you can see it, right? Good. Okay, so on the agenda today, I'd like to review what the experts recommend for nutrition guidelines for survivorship, highlight specific nutrients of interest, give a show and tell with our recipes, right? It's going to be a little bit more like meal assembly than a recipe start to finish, because we've got to make this a little bit easier for us. And then I mentioned like a Q&A, so definitely drop some questions or comments in the chat, but at the end I will allow some extra time. Now, as I go through the recommendations, I want to list for each of them sort of like the what is the recommendation, why the experts make that recommendation, and then how to. So what, why, and how. Okay, so that's my objective today for you all. So let's start first with those nutrition recommendations. I share this graphic with like everyone. Okay, so if you haven't seen it already, now's the time. Okay, so these are what the experts recommend in terms of a lifestyle for cancer protection. It's from the World Cancer Research Fund. And they're a consortium, an international consortium of about 5 different agencies. And here in the States, we have the American Institute for Cancer Research. So if you are Googling and looking up nutrition related information about cancer, I want you to Google American Institute for Cancer Research, because they really are the reliable, trustworthy experts in the field. Now, you might notice on this graphic right in the middle there, it says cancer prevention recommendations, the operative word prevention. And you're thinking, wait, I've been diagnosed. I need help now after being diagnosed, right? Well, what the experts find is that the very same ways that these foods and this lifestyle protects us from getting cancer in the first place are the same ways that our lifestyle might help prevent the promotion or the progression of disease. So they are finding that after someone has been diagnosed with cancer, you see that last, on the bottom right-hand side, that last recommendation is that after you have been diagnosed, it is advised that you follow these recommendations as closely as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive deeper into each of these, except for a couple. So I'm not going to talk today about physical activity, because we have a lot of professionals here that can do that for you. Okay, so check out our YouTube channel, check out our calendar. There are a lot of different programs, classes or recorded ones on our YouTube channel to look at for that physical activity piece. And I'm also not going to talk about breastfeeding because that's probably not an issue for this audience, right? So I don't need to talk about breastfeeding today as it relates to cancer protection. Okay, so the first recommendation is to maintain a healthy weight. Now, if I had you all here, I would give you a quiz question. I won't put my two members in the audience in the spotlight, but there are a certain number of cancer types that are associated with overweight and obesity. So if someone is overweight or obese, it puts them at risk for 13 different types of cancer. Now that comes to a surprise to a lot of people. And so we want to know what that's all about, how we can help ourselves. So what is a healthy weight? Well, according to the research, when the experts look at weight with cancer risk, they typically look at BMI. So body mass index is a relatively simple, inexpensive tool that researchers can use to study thousands of people at a time. And the desired range is 18.5 to 24.9 kilograms per meter squared. It's just this equation we use. And that's associated with an acceptable range for weight. And that may put someone at not necessarily reduced risk for cancer, but at least protect them from cancer progression or promotion. Another tool that researchers look at for determining weight status is waist circumference. So they define sort of a healthy weight as one that is less than 40 inches for men. And the reason for that, why does weight matter? Well, there's a few things that are going on here. So if we are overweight or obese, it increases the levels of inflammation in our body. It can lead to poor blood sugar control, and it can also increase the circulation of these substances that might otherwise set the stage for cancer to happen. And we kind of call this like an environment that sets the stage for cancer. So if we could minimize all of those things, minimize inflammation, control our blood sugars, minimize those circulating cancer-causing substances by maintaining a healthy weight or controlling our belly fat, then we're going to help protect ourselves. So how do we do that? The how-to. Well, is it a diet? Is it a fad diet? No, absolutely not. It's a lifestyle. And so when we find that individuals pursue a healthy lifestyle, as it turns out, their weight also follows that kind of process. They maintain a healthy weight. So that lifestyle that seems to matter is a little bit of what I'm presenting today, but also too, as it relates to pursuing a healthy weight, they want us to focus on behavior change. So we use this expression, healthy habits, so what are your habits day to day? And is it worth considering shifting some of your habits? And I'm going to give you some examples today. But is it worth making some of those shifts rather than being on a diet or off a diet, but thinking about your habits and your behaviors? Because if you pursue those healthy behaviors, you're doing a lot of great things for yourself. You're pursuing good health. And as I mentioned, chances are you're going to maintain a healthy weight that way. You want to consume a quality diet to maintain a healthy weight. I'm going to present that information next. Portion control helps a lot of people manage their weight. It's like one of those funny things. If they can kind of eat whatever they want, but if they just eat less of it, they can maintain a healthy weight. Physical activity matters for that piece. Sleep, as it turns out, matters for a healthy weight. So not only how long you sleep, the duration, but also the quality of the sleep that you get. So I know that that's something that a lot of individuals struggle with that I work with. But if you're not sleeping well, it may actually impact some of your hormones and some of the things that might trigger you otherwise to eat, and certainly can increase inflammation in the body. So we can talk about that at the end if anyone has questions. And then accountability. So as it turns out, if you have to report to someone else, maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a friend, that helps us pursue a habit that we want to change. And one of the groups that I run here at the center, that's exactly what we do. We have the group commit to one another, and they know week by week for 20 weeks that they're going to be held accountable to what commitment they made. And we find that really helps people pursue a healthy lifestyle. So here are some resources if you're looking to maintain a healthy weight. The CDC has a couple great websites, one where you can actually calculate your BMI, and another one that helps instruct you how to measure your waist circumference. Really cool. And then, if you're looking to lose weight or at least manage your weight, there's lots of great programs out there. And Cancer Wellness Center has one of them. It's called Weight Loss for Wellness. And we run it, I'm a co-facilitator. We run it twice a year. So if you're interested in that as well, there's a link on the slide, but I can certainly point you in the right direction if you're interested. Okay, next up. How am I sounding so far? I'm doing okay? You can ask a question.
So how do you feel about the BMI update? It's very controversial.
Yeah. How do I feel about the BMI calculation? It's controversial. I got a savvy member in the audience. It is controversial. So the BMI equation is flawed. What happens is all we're doing is measuring your height and your weight and putting it into a calculation to get that number at the end. But it doesn't depict accurately what that weight is. So is it someone who is muscular versus someone who has more fat mass? We know that someone who has more muscle mass, this is desired, even though it may put someone in the overweight status. That's okay, because this is really equivalent with good health. So that's why working with someone one-on-one, or even just kind of using your good judgment, and so sometimes visually I might look at someone, or I might pull out that tape measure. I think that tape measure is more important than BMI, to be honest. But many individuals I work with too, they work on strength training and resistance training because they lose muscle mass, and that's precious for cancer protection anyway. Okay, so great question. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next recommendation. Eat a diet based on plant foods, or a plant-based diet. One of my favorite recommendations. This does not mean you need to be vegan or vegetarian. It just means that you are pro-plant. You're not necessarily anti-meat, but you're pro-plant. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. What is a whole food plant-based diet? It's that most of your meals and your snacks contain mostly whole grains, vegetables, fruit, beans, and lentils, as well as nuts and seeds. And that acronym WFPBD is a whole food plant-based diet. It's easier to say that. And why does it matter for cancer protection? Well, it's abundant in nutrients that actually support our immune function, that regulate inflammation, and in more ways than one exert anti-cancer properties. And those special compounds happen to be found in antioxidants and phytochemicals. And I'm going to highlight some important ones for you to think about today. And then also fiber. So a whole food plant-based diet gives you all these great cancer protective properties, but it also at the same time tends to be lower in total calories. And so this helps us pursue a healthy weight. And remember, there are 13 different cancer types that are related to being overweight or obese. So it's like you kind of get check, both things off that list. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on a whole food plant-based diet because this is probably the most important recommendation in my opinion. So again, it does not mean vegan or vegetarian. It means that most of your meals and snacks contain whole grains, veggies, fruit, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. And it's not as difficult as you might think. So if you're making eggs in the morning, could you stuff it with some extra vegetables? You're adding those cancer protective foods that are nourishing in the first place, but have cancer protective compounds. If you're in a habit where you have like a hamburger or a deli sandwich for lunch, could you have an alternative? So could you make a bean burger? Certainly. I've got lots of ideas. Or could you have something, even a convenient frozen product? There's lots of bean burgers or alternative products on the market that are great choices. Ideally, I want you in the kitchen and making your own, but they certainly could be a step in the right direction for you. And then even when we eat out, so I did a lot of eating out this weekend. I had a friend in town and we went out to dinner like every night. But it's not impossible to eat healthfully when you eat out, right? So we went to a wonderful restaurant last night. They had kebabs on the menu. I was like, yes, please. It's like that time of year. for the grilling season, right? And the options were steak, chicken. I think they had swordfish on there. And I was like, I'll take the cremini kebabs because they are delicious. That mushroom is a nice meaty alternative. And they were certainly delicious. So you can see how you can do these things. We're not expecting you to be vegan, but if you do these types of meals most of the time, then you're pursuing a plant-based diet. So some other recommendations in order to consume a whole food plant-based diet. Some people, depending on where they are on the spectrum, just think about maybe adding one more vegetarian meal per week, or think about your day-to-day. Are you eating 0 vegetables? Could you add just one more? Just one more vegetable. Maybe you're eating 3 vegetables a day. Could you add one more? You know, the more the better, essentially. And then dessert. I think a lot of us, you know, that enjoy dessert, we can easily make a substitution with seasonal, local, fresh fruit. It's delicious this time of year. And I think you'll agree, it's, you know, it's going to give you such bonus, such bang for buck in terms of flavor, but the nutrition, you know, so think about that for yourself. And then this is from the American Institute for Cancer Research. They call it the New American Plate. And I just love this concept, this visual concept of, okay, every time I'm sitting down to eat, I should make my plate look like this, or try to make my plate look like this. So hopefully what you notice is that 2/3 of the plate, or even more, is occupied by whole food plant sources. So you see like some quinoa, I believe that is on the plate, lots of colorful vegetables like broccoli and tomatoes, the peppers and the zucchini. And then the remaining third of the plate is for your protein. And maybe it's an animal protein or a plant protein. So you see some chicken there, could be fish, but maybe you want to have something like beans or tofu. Great options here. And again, you're kind of off and running when you just design your plate to look like this. So it's a simple way without kind of overcomplicating matters. That's whole food plant-based. Okay, next recommendation. Eat less fast food and highly processed food. So I have another quiz question. What percentage of calories, maybe we should drop this in the chat. What percentage of calories do we eat from processed food? What percentage might it be? All the foods we eat, what percentage come from processed choices? Oh wait, my participants here cheated. At least they confessed to it, so we'll take it. It might be, I mean, I was kind of surprised by the number. It gives me job security. I always say that. I have some work to do, definitely.
I think maybe 5.
5%? Good guess. We're gonna go a little bit higher. I can't believe it's as high as it is.
That's our only guess.
60%. 60% of calories come from processed food in our diet. Yikes. Yikes. So what are highly processed food? Most of you know what fast food is, right? So I don't really need to define that. But highly processed foods, here's some examples. Sugary drinks, cookies, crackers, chips, breakfast cereal, deli meat. Those are great examples. They're really not food. I always say like they're edible, but they're not really food. Like they've kind of lost all their nutrition, right? And they've acquired some undesired additives in the meantime. So we could do better. Now, the issue too with highly processed foods are that they really taste amazing. Right? Like you probably agree. Like think of sugary drinks, think of like chips, you know, like they just zing our taste buds as we put it. So as soon as they hit our palate, we're like, yes, give me more. So that tends to lead to this desire for more of them. And we crave more, and we find we eat them. When we look at people who eat highly processed food, they eat them quickly and they eat a lot of them, you know, and it probably has to do with the fact that there are these additives. They're so high in salt, so high in sugar, even some of our fats, that they really tempt us to want more. Now, I think, if you ask me, I think if you're looking to change behavior, there are ways to reset your palate so you can kind of learn to like less, where when you introduce the highly processed food to your diet, it's going to be too much because you've reset your palate to learn to like less. And it just takes some time. Now, why do fast food and highly processed foods influence cancer risk or cancer progression? Well, if we're eating 60% of calories from them, that means only 40% of our calories are coming from the really good stuff. We need to do better. Even if we're doing 50-50, I'll take that, right? But if we can really shift down, and we don't really know what percentage seems to confer any protection in terms of nutrition, but if we take a kind of self-assessment, if we can shift down, that would be tremendous, because remember, it's all about adding on and focusing on that rather than taking away. And think about it. These highly processed foods tend to be high calorie. So very low in nutrition, but high in calories. What happens if we overeat them? We're going to gain weight. And we know gaining weight is a problem for cancer. So how to eat less fast food and highly processed food? Just eat less. But certainly for fast food, I think that makes sense. That's a habit. You know, if you're having fast food 3 times a week, could you do it just once a week? And that's a great goal for you to think about doing. But for processed foods, I like the idea of just unprocessing your diet. So I would say most processed foods are like snack foods, you know, so could you just easily make substitutions with whole sources, like some nuts, you know, some walnuts or almonds, pecans, you know, the sky's the limit there. Fresh fruit, or just doing a little prep with some veggies and some hummus, really popular options now and easy enough to do. I think it's just, again, a habit. If you cook for yourself at home more often, you definitely will be unprocessing your diet, because think about restaurant foods. They're probably using processed foods in some of their meals. I put oats for breakfast because remember, breakfast cereals were on that list as a highly processed food. And oats are just as quick and convenient and delicious, in my opinion, just a habit. And then sugary beverages, you know, even those sports drinks, I think if we can make substitutions with some flavored water or just even good old plain water, carbonated water, seltzer for a little bit of interest, that's a step in the right direction to unprocess your diet. Okay, next recommendation, eat less red meat and eat less processed meat. So here's another quiz question. I should have told them not to cheat. What percentage of us eat processed meat every day? This was shocking. Is anyone guessing in the chat? Processed meat every day.
90, 80.
Whoa, I like those guesses.
80.
80, yeah. I mean, it's not far off. The estimates are 63 to 74%. Processed meat every single day. I think it probably comes from like deli meat, from like a sandwich. Like so many individuals I work with, they just have a deli sandwich for lunch. It's just, again, a habit. And if they kick that habit or just substitute it with something else, they don't miss it. It's really interesting. So deli meat counts as processed meat. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So what are the recommendations? The experts want us to have no more than 12 to 18 ounces of cooked red meat per week. That's because red meat offers some valuable nutrients, and as it turns out, it can be incorporated in a healthy diet. It does not need to be there. And I certainly work with individuals who are interested to replace that with alternatives, and that would be a good choice for some. For those of you who find you're eating a lot of red meat, this is sort of the threshold we're looking to limit. And processed meat on the other hand, the experts want us to limit altogether. So if we can really save that only for once in a while, once in a blue moon, sparingly on occasion, that's what it is advised. So why are they making this recommendation? Well, more than 18 ounces of cooked red meat, and they think it might even be a little less, they're not sure, but 18 ounces seems to be the cutoff right now. That 18 ounces of cooked red meat increases the risk for colorectal cancer. And it happens to do, again, with just this direct mechanism where the red meat is hitting the colon, and that's where it affects risk. We're not sure if it's related to other cancer types yet, so it might just be a matter of time. Processed meat, on the other hand, it's got all these compounds, and I'm not going to get into too much of that today. But these compounds, there's not a lot of nutrition in processed meat. Like that's a really highly processed food choice. And these compounds work together, what's in this package of deli meat, and they are found to increase the risk for colorectal cancer. And really it's almost just any amount. So they don't even give us a cutoff or a threshold for processed meat. And again, that's just for colorectal cancer, but time will tell if it really influences cancer risk for other cancer types. So how do we eat less red meat and processed meat? Again, it's all about those habits. So healthy habits might suggest to replace red meat with alternatives. Make your own turkey burger. I love a vegetarian chili or like a bean burger. Lots of options, delicious. And I think you'll agree, they're worth trying. I think the deli sandwich for lunch is a habit, and maybe it's worth considering an alternative. So I love the idea of just making some tuna with some hummus instead of mayo or some mashed avocado. Some of my participants love to mash some beans with hummus or mashed avocado. That's equally delicious. Or if you baked some chicken last night, could you just slice some and use that instead of deli meat for your lunch? And you're unprocessing your diet when you do that. How are we doing so far? Any chats or questions? Doing good? I like a little check-in. All right. So drink less sugary beverages. This is the next recommendation. Sugary beverages lead to weight gain. So they recommend we minimize them altogether. So sugary drinks are sodas, you know what they are. Sodas, sports drinks, even coffee drinks. Like you go to the cafe and you can see like how much is in there. Like sugary drinks are pretty impressive. The amount of sugar really piles up, and we're learning a lot more about that. Why do they increase risk? Well, the experts are convinced that sugary drinks cause weight gain. So when they're in someone's diet, they are going to increase the risk for gaining weight over the lifespan. So we want to try to cut them out if we can. Now, sugary drinks are also those highly processed food choices, right? So again, not a lot of nutrition, a lot of empty calories. So we can do better with that. And sugary drinks also too, like we passively consume them. Like we don't tend to fill up on a sugary drink. So we just keep drinking more and more and more. So that's problematic too. You have a question?
Diet drinks?
I love that question. So what about diet drinks? Are they in this set of recommendations? The experts at this time say no. They don't find that sugar alternatives or what might be in a diet beverage are associated with either weight gain or cancer risk. Now, I will say it depends on the individual. Sometimes I might push them to make substitutions still. Think about this is only one thing you're doing in your whole diet, and maybe there are other more important things to address first. But they are looking at how some of us might metabolize sugar substitutes, and our gut varies. So some of us have bacteria or pathogens in our gut that use those artificial sweeteners as calories. So here we are thinking, oh, we're drinking a calorie-free beverage, but some of us have a certain makeup in the microbiome, as it's called, that will metabolize those. So, and also too, sugar alternatives are hundreds of times sweeter than sugar. So we're talking like 600, 800 times, some of them. So imagine that. So when you're used to drinking a sugar alternative, you've lost now the appreciation for how sweet sugar is because it's hundreds of times less sweet. So again, it might be part of training the palate, and it just takes time. Okay, so it's worth considering. What a good question. Okay, next, how to. How about a how to? So how do I drink less sugary beverages? Again, it's all about that substitution, replacing. So could you replace them with some unsweetened versions? Tea, iced tea, coffee, iced coffee, sparkling water, infused water. Oh gosh, there's sky's the limit with options there. And again, delicious. It just takes time to do this and a little bit of planning. Can I adjust my mask? But what I also like about this slide is that you'll see that tea and coffee are on there. Tea and coffee have compounds that are cancer protective. So not only are you kicking out something that might not be beneficial for you, but you're adding to. And I just so love that concept. You know, if you're here and you're attending today, you're looking to empower yourself and you're looking for ways to make just a little change that will be significant. And this is a great example right here. So tea and coffee contain compounds, especially polyphenols, that are cancer protective for us.
So if you find any alternative sports drink beverages that don't say from an electrolyte perspective, from a calorie perspective, that still allow you to perform, but you don't kind of do this to your body if you're kind of doing this each day?
Really good question. Okay, so what if we're like performing, right? Meaning like going out for a run or riding a bike for a while, or in the pool swimming, and we need a replacement drink because we're out for maybe more than an hour. And that's usually the recommendation in the sports nutrition world, is if you're exercising for more than an hour, you might lose electrolytes and fluids because of that duration of the exercise. So some individuals I work with will actually make their own electrolyte beverage. And it does include sugar, but it might not include artificial colors, which you might see in some of the sports drinks. And it's designed in a way that will enhance absorption of those electrolytes. So sometimes it incorporates sugar along with salt, and then sometimes salt substitutes. So some of the salt substitutes on the market replace sodium with potassium. So then there's another way to enhance the replacing some of the electrolytes and fluids. Some individuals also like coconut water. If you look at that label, holy cow, really high in potassium. And that's why it's kind of being marketed as being like this hydrating beverage. Really, if you're not working out more than an hour, you really don't need to use a sports drink. It's that level of activity where it might be advised for you, but otherwise water hydrates us the best. Or you can talk to your medical team because they can measure your electrolytes and see if you need any replacement. Okay, really good question there. Okay. Next recommendation, limit alcohol consumption. This isn't a fun one. So what are the recommendations? The experts advise for cancer protection, it's best not to drink alcohol. And why is that? So it's complicated and they don't really know what the relationship is for cancer protection. They're not sure what is wrong with alcohol and why does it pose such a threat to our health. But there's a few reasons that they suspect. The first is that alcohol itself metabolizes into ethanol and then again into acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is it's italicized there for a reason. That's known to be a carcinogen, and it damages DNA and it prevents our bodies from repairing damaged cells. Eek, we don't want that. Alcohol in excess also reduces folate absorption. So folate is a B vitamin. And if we have some competition going on here where we're drinking too much alcohol and we're not absorbing our folate, then we are missing out on that protection where folate repairs some of our cells. So if we don't have enough folate in our diet, or we're losing it because alcohol is competing with it, then we're missing that opportunity to repair damaged cells. Another reason that alcohol is an issue, it acts as a solvent. So if we have any other carcinogens in our body or in our environment, it's only going to make them more potent, right, and more damaging. And then lastly, alcohol tends to be high in calories. So if we're not careful, it can contribute to weight gain as well. So something to definitely think about. Okay, we're going to keep moving. So how to drink less alcohol? I think, again, it's all about those healthy habits. So could you just think before you drink? Like there's a big campaign out there from the NIH, lots of great resources on their website about just thinking, moderating, and having less. So it's simple, having smaller amounts, serve yourself less, sip slower, keep some days of the week alcohol free, or if you're out, we're kind of getting out more. If you're out, I was this weekend, skip around, maybe, the servers come back and everyone wants another round. Maybe you say, I'm going to take one. I'm going to take a break this round. Or you could replace with a non-alcoholic version. We're going to make a recipe today that's like a mocktail. So we're going to see how that one comes out. But I actually am working with someone who recently found a non-alcoholic beer that he really enjoys. He was kind of like a heavy beer drinker. He liked IPAs. And he found, I guess the market's kind of exploded because it's an issue, and so there is a market for some of these alternative products. So just look for some of those. Okay, this is the last recommendation. Yes, this is the last recommendation. Okay, so do not rely on dietary supplements for cancer protection. So the experts advise just that. Don't consider dietary supplements as necessary. They're not going to protect us from cancer. There's no good evidence out there that suggests that that's the case. Why is that so? Well, research is lacking. We don't see that there is any benefit for using dietary supplements. Dietary ingredients do not offer the same benefits as eating the whole food. So what happens is our bodies like to absorb a wide range of vitamins and minerals and other compounds in food, including the antioxidants and phytochemicals. They all seem to work together and they all seem to be necessary in this package in order for us to absorb them. So if we start to take them out and isolate them into single components, it doesn't have the same effect. It's never going to compare. So we find that, to absorb a mineral or a vitamin or some other compound in food, it might require that package. And as soon as it's taken out, it's lost that benefit of having the best absorption possible from the whole food source. There's lots more to say about dietary supplements, but I'm not going to get into that right now. There are some exceptions. So again, like if you're concerned that you're not getting enough in your diet or you need more of a vitamin or a mineral, you certainly could just discuss this with your medical team. So how can you meet nutrition needs through diet alone? What the experts find when they ask people what they're eating in a quality diet, it's all about that plate model that I showed, right? So try to have 2/3 or more from plant foods. Plant foods are where it's at in terms of those compounds, the vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. Okay, we find that those foods, when you're eating a variety of them, not vegan, but eating a variety of them regularly, you will satisfy your requirements for what you need for cancer protective compounds. Now, there is a kind of a concept in our country that if something's good for us, then a lot must be really good for us. And that's not really the case. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news on that, but we just need enough. It's like really just a matter of adequacy. So too little or too much, both not a good position to be in. We want just the right amount. And that's especially the case for vitamins and minerals. Okay, so now I'm going to shift towards food and nutrients of interest. I just have a handful to explain. So the first one is cruciferous vegetables. Do we know what those are? No cheating. So it's a whole group of vegetables in this family. You see some on the slide there: cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, arugula, cauliflower. There's many, many others to choose from, but those are just some of the favorites that kind of bubble up to the surface. What is so special? Why cruciferous vegetables? Well, they contain some compounds. They're phytochemicals. They're called isothiocyanates and indoles. That's not a quiz question. Okay. And specifically in research in the lab, they have found that those compounds can inhibit the growth of prostate cancer cells. So they take specific prostate cancer cell lines, they expose them to these compounds, and they see it inhibits their growth. So what we want to try to do, if we can, is eat them raw. Because what happens if we cook them or heat them up, it destroys or renders the enzyme a little less able for us to absorb those compounds. So if we can help it, we want to try to have them raw. Sometimes I'll recommend, I'm going to give you a recipe in a moment, but sometimes I'll recommend if you're chopping up some broccoli and roasting it, just to save a couple on the side and eat that raw, because as it turns out, Mother Nature's looking out for us. And if we eat a couple of the raw cruciferous vegetables along with the cooked ones, the enzymes in the raw ones will let us absorb those compounds from the cooked ones. So if you're like me, you love your roasted Brussels sprouts, right? You don't really want them raw. You could do this, right? So you can have like maybe just a couple bites of broccoli and it's still going to give you those beneficial compounds. Because I think they're delicious that way.
Can you define dietary supplements?
Oh, sure. We'll go back.
Sorry.
It's okay. So dietary supplements, they are ingredients essentially. So they could be a vitamin, a mineral, an herbal, a botanical, an enzyme, a protein, right? So the sky's the limit. There's a ton of products on the market. It's like $1 billion industry, or it can be a combination of those things. They are not regular, they're loosely regulated by the FDA. So generally speaking, most of them are on the market and we have access to them without them necessarily demonstrating safety. So some of them are relatively harmless, I have to say, but we don't know about a lot of the other products that might be newer to the market. And so that's sort of the concern. We don't really know. It's up to the manufacturer to really put forth a quality product. We have to trust that they really have our best interests at heart, where they make a product that we actually digest and absorb. And they also make a product that is free of other contaminants. So sometimes they'll find some heavy metals like cadmium and lead in dietary supplements. And so, you know, we probably just want to be savvy about our choices, and dietary supplements as well. We want to just be careful of the dose. So sometimes something like vitamin C, for example, I just did a presentation on Friday where, you know, there are some products for vitamin C on the market that are like thousands of times more than what we really require. And it might not be necessarily beneficial for us. So we just want to know what we're taking. Hopefully that answered that question. Yeah. All right. So we're going to move forward. All right. Cruciferous veggies. Our bottom line on those, they're also consistently linked with reduced risk for prostate cancer, as well as recurrence and metastatic spread. So men who are eating them, we find that that's statistically the benefit that they get. Not too bad, right? We'll take it. All right. So next group, Allium vegetables. Have we heard of those? It's our garlic and onion family. And I didn't know this. There's 500 species. 500. So find one you like, right? You're bound to find one. I love shallot. You know, I wish I used it more, but I just love shallot. But some people, you know, it's easy enough to have garlic. So easy. Like we're going to use garlic and onion in several of our recipes today. But this, again, the sky's the limit. Okay. So just explore some choices for yourself. Now, allium veggies contain these compounds called organosulfur compounds, and they have been shown to induce cell cycle arrest, as well as apoptosis of prostate cancer cells. So if you're not familiar with apoptosis, what that is programmed cell death. So our cells that are non-cancerous cells, if something goes wrong with them as they're replicating, they commit suicide because they're like, wait, we're not a healthy cell like we're supposed to be. I'm going to kill myself. So cancer cells lack that mechanism. But these compounds have been shown to change that, to tell them, hey, you're a cancer cell, you're not normal, you need to kill yourself, which is really powerful stuff, really, really. And again, like we find that when men are eating more of these allium vegetables, they have a reduced risk for prostate cancer. So there must be something to it. There must be some sort of connection there. Number 3 out of 4, we're going to talk about soy, one of my favorites. I make no bones about it. All right, so soy includes, whole soy foods include tofu, tempeh, edamame, and soy milk. Lots of other soy products on the market. I prefer you have the whole form, like some of the examples you see on the slide. They're less processed. So they're really going to, again, retain more nutrition without the additives. So why soy? What's so special about it? It contains genistein, which inhibits the synthesis of prostaglandins, and prostaglandins otherwise promote inflammation. And having an inflammatory state in the body is conducive to carcinogenesis. So if we can reduce inflammation by consuming some of these whole food plant-based choices, including soy, this is a good thing. It also contains daidzein and glycitin. So these two compounds are phytochemicals, and along with genistein, they may induce cell cycle arrest in prostate cancer cells. Another bonus. Really good stuff. All right, and lastly, tomatoes. Maybe you heard tomatoes are good for you. Maybe. It's a good time of year for tomatoes too. So tomatoes contain a phytochemical called lycopene. And lycopene is enhanced when it's cooked. So when we have cooked tomatoes, it makes that lycopene more potent. And we also absorb the lycopene better when it's alongside a fat, like an oil. So preferably a healthy oil. I'm going to talk about that. And what's so great about lycopene? It inhibits prostate cancer cell growth and metastatic spread. That's what's been shown. They have found that those men that eat 2 or more servings of cooked tomatoes per week, they had a 66% lower risk for metastatic prostate cancer. Wow, that's big.
Now you tell.
That's big. Well, we can still add it. It's okay. And then those men that were eating the most amount of lycopene, and this is very often how they do diet studies, they'll compare people. So they'll put them in groups and they'll have the people that eat the less and then the people that eat the most, and then they compare the two. So the men that were eating the most, they had 28% decreased risk for lethal prostate cancer compared to the men who were eating the least. So it makes sense to just have some cooked tomatoes during the week. Why not, right? It's easy enough to do. I'm going to give you some examples today too. All right, so speaking of that.
So do you get nothing from raw tomatoes?
You do. Great question. Does it make sense to have raw tomatoes? Will you get the lycopene then? You will, just not as potent, right? So again, that's one of those things where I don't want you to not eat the tomatoes because you're like, oh, it's not cooked. I'm not getting the lycopene. You'll get some. Even watermelon or other red vegetables and fruit, you'll get some lycopene. That's what gives it that color. But again, anytime we can cook it, we're going to really enhance the potency. Okay. So just think about, like, that's another thing you can kind of do a self-evaluation. Like how much am I having? Could I add one more?
So how about a can of tomatoes? Is it still in there, or is that like?
Good question. Will a can of tomatoes give us the lycopene? Yeah. Yes, because usually they're heating up the tomatoes as they're putting it in the can to pasteurize it. So it's really heated. Yeah. So, and the recipes I'm including today, you take advantage of that.
Okay.
So convenient. Yeah. And tomato paste is another great example too. So if you're like making your own marinara, you could do that. Or you could easily, if you're making a soup or a stew, a nice little squeeze of tomato paste, you're really concentrating the lycopene in that. Really good question. Okay. So I wonder, do we have any other questions or comments in the chat before we move on? We're getting to the good stuff now.
Just have a comment that we have a participant who, when cooks their broccoli, they use the stalks, cook them all, and chop them up and put them in scrambled eggs too.
Can you come in here and show me how you do that? That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. You know,
How about ketchup, Lori?
Does ketchup have lycopene in it? Yes, you will get some. Good choice. You could make your own. Look at ketchup products too. Read labels. A little bit of added sugar sometimes. But again, do your self-evaluation. Really good questions. So the recipes I want to share with you today are here. I want to show you a roasted edamame, taking advantage of a whole soy food, a cruciferous crunch salad, an easy gazpacho, good choice this time of year, right? A Bloody Mary mocktail. We're going to see how that turns out. We're going to see. And then a tempeh lettuce tomato Sammy. I've made this one before and I thought it was worthy of considering for today. So the roasted edamame, I'm going to show you, it just takes advantage of a convenient product. When you're using edamame, you're getting more fiber, a plant protein, and then those cancer protective compounds. Remember I mentioned that for soy. And I think this is a great substitute for snacks, like a snack food, like cracker. Like if you're looking for a crunch, this can do it. And sometimes I'll make a batch of it and even replace my croutons in a salad with the roasted beans. Edamame is a whole soy food, so I love this idea. But if you want to experiment with chickpeas, the sky's the limit. It's a lot of fun with this one. A cruciferous crunch salad, we're going to take advantage of a convenient product that chops up some Brussels sprouts and some cabbage, and we're going to eat it raw. How great is that? That's what we want to do, right? And in your recipe, you'll see if you can't find this particular product, you can chop up cabbage and kale and Brussels sprouts on your own and make your own. And we're going to top it with some hemp seed or even flaxseed if you would like, and then some walnuts. Great source of some omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory. And then the walnuts to give a little, well, all of those, the hemp and the flaxseed, give a little bit of protein and a little bit of crunch. So some texture with the nutrition. And then we're going to make a vinaigrette on the side. The gazpacho, I mean, I wish I could make it the way it looks on this slide because that looks delicious. One word, this recipe is like packed with lycopene. I wish we could measure it because it's going to like be off the Richter scale. We're going to use canned tomatoes. We're going to use tomato juice as well. So we're going to get a lot of lycopene here. And then our virgin Bloody Mary. So I wrote there lycopene in the glass without the alcohol. And then the tempeh, we're going to experiment with tempeh today because I find a lot of people are intimidated by soy. We find it does have very protective properties as it relates to prostate cancer. So that's why I'm really emphasizing some soy foods today. But I think once you try the tempeh for yourself, you might be pleasantly surprised really how delicious it is and how many different ways you can use it. So it's a versatile choice. It's a whole soy food. I'm going to explain it a little more as we're cooking, and it really does pack a punch in terms of protein and fiber. Yeah.
So I'm straying from the nutrition side of things a little bit, but with respect to when you highlighted some of the, I'll say, sleeplessness and that type of thing, inflammation, what's your perspective on THC?
Oh, good question. Okay, so how does THC enhance the lifestyle? Really to create a body that might have less inflammation in it, or even help enhance the other lifestyle variables that we're looking to do our best with? I wish I had the answer.
Okay.
We had someone, I'm looking at Savina, we had someone present on THC like a year ago. Yeah, Dr. Mendoza. So it's on our YouTube channel because she's an integrative physician in North Shore and lovely. And she is really pretty savvy. She stays up to date on the literature for THC. So the content, I'm sure, in our YouTube channel on her video might be very helpful for you.
I can share Mendoza Temple, Dr. Mendoza Temple.
Yeah, I'm sure she addresses all of that. And I like the idea of integrating what you can when you can, certainly. Yeah. Okay, so here's just a quick summary. Aim for a whole food plant-based diet. Think about those specific foods and compounds that I mentioned that will just enhance that whole food plant-based diet. When you're doing that, it may help you minimize some of those high calorie, low nutrient choices and seek out your nutrition and your nutrients from food rather than from supplements. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share. We're going to move our camera. Hi, everyone. We're going to see if we can get Savina to help me in the kitchen a little bit. This is the fun part. I just want to see us up too. Hopefully everyone can see well enough. I'll make sure we can when we do this. We're good? Yeah. That's right.
We've got some questions on probiotics, Lori.
Oh, all right, fire them away.
What do you think about probiotics?
What do I think about probiotics? Well, what do I think about probiotics? Probiotics are live active cultures found in foods like yogurt or cultured dairy or other fermented foods or in a dietary supplement. They are really indicated for specific conditions. Let's see that one somewhere. They're indicated for specific conditions. So sometimes they may help, sometimes they may not. Sometimes we don't really know if they're helping. So I want you to ask your medical doctor or your primary care provider because they know you best and if one would be recommended for you. We don't see any data at the moment that they offer any help or protection for the carcinogenic process, but they are looking at how the microbiome might be implicated with cancer. So it's probably just a matter of time. Sometimes probiotics are not advised for someone who's immunocompromised. Because there's 1 or 2 case studies out there where someone was taking a probiotic and they got a blood infection because of it. So we don't want that if we can help it. Yeah, we don't want a blood infection. Yeah, not a good thing. So we want to just double check with your medical team. Very often where I am in the oncology clinic, if they're not allowed to take probiotics, we'll talk about food forms and where they can find some probiotics in foods. And then we also want to emphasize that whole food plant-based diet because that helps that microbiome function at its best. So all the probiotics in the world are not necessarily going to make up for a gut that's not happy and functioning well. So there's more than one ways to approach really a happy, healthy gut. And that's where I can help. Okay. Yeah.
Things like juicing and cold press juicing and things like that. Clearly this is about, enhancing your diet, getting nutrition through your diet and food, as opposed to taking a glass of pre-juice and saying, I've got it all.
Yeah.
Any perspective on it's better than nothing, or
Yeah.
you're better off obviously doing what we're trying to do here?
Yeah. So I don't know if everyone could hear that. The question was about like cold pressed juices or juicing or smoothies even. Like I always suggest to individuals that it's one thing out of all the things they're doing. So could you do better? Maybe. Could you do worse? Yes. Could you do worse than a cold pressed juice? Sure. With soda, or not having any of it at all and not getting any vitamins or minerals that day because you had no fruits or vegetables. So you get to kind of decide. I think ideally we want the whole forms, right? Because anytime, I'm going to wash my hands, anytime we can eat fruit and vegetables, better for us. Yeah, it's definitely better. Especially because the fiber is good for our gut, the fiber is good for inflammation, and the fiber is good for controlling blood sugars. So we lose that fiber, right? When we juice. If we drink a cold pressed juice, we lose all of that. A smoothie might keep the fiber in, that's preferred, but it's still not the same as eating it. Good question. All right, so what we're going to start first with, do you have the recipes there? Yeah. Okay, what we're going to start first with is edamame. So we got frozen shelled edamame, shelled soybeans. So these were not cooked. You could find actually frozen cooked shelled edamame, even more convenient. So I did just pop these in the microwave. I put them in a glass bowl and I popped them in the microwave for like 4.5 minutes and they were done. So what we're going to do is we're going to roast them. Yum. So I'm going to take, I put them on my sheet pan, and you want them as dry as possible because they won't get crispy crunchy unless they're dry. So I let them sit out. I put a paper towel over them to take off all that extra moisture. And sometimes I put a parchment paper on the bottom. We didn't happen to have any in the kitchen today. So I'm just going to drizzle my olive oil and I'm going to sprinkle a little salt on top of this. And we're going to roast away. So we have the oven at about 425 and it's preheated. And we're going to put it in there for like 20-30 minutes. We're going to see what it smells like. And then we're going to enjoy it. I can't wait. Now I use some olive oil here, so I'm just tossing that together. You could use another oil if you wanted. Don't be afraid to heat at this temperature with olive oil because actually we're finding it's perfectly safe and healthy to do. Some people ask me about that. But if you wanted to use another oil like avocado oil or a neutral oil, because this is going to, give that extra little flavor from the olive oil. You certainly could do that. You could also use different spices on here. So you could put, I gotta open this. I don't want to open it. I'm going to use the salt. You could put like garlic. That would be great on this, or like paprika or cayenne or oregano, rose. I mean, the sky's the limit with seasonings on this, right? You could put, you can even sprinkle a little cheese on here, like Parmesan cheese if you wanted. But I'm going to give them a good amount of salt because it tastes delicious that way. And anytime, again, you're making something, you are going to probably add less So if we bought this at the store or went to a restaurant, they're probably gonna add more salt to this than I just added. So not too shabby, right? So we're gonna stick this in the oven. And I just trust that we're gonna smell when it's ready. I'm gonna toss it like halfway through as well. Okay, so we've got that guy going. Easy peasy. Look at that. I love that. I don't know if you do, but I love it. Easier the better. All right, so I'm gonna move that aside. Let's move over. I'll go to the gazpacho now. Yeah, let's do the gazpacho. So, you like gazpacho? Yeah. Just think like salsa in a bowl. It's like salsa.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cold soup.
It's a cold soup, which is good for the season. You could actually easily warm this up if you wanted like a tomato soup. You could just put it in the oven. And it's, again, sort of versatile. I think like you make it the way you like it. So I tend to like a more chunky gazpacho. And we also lost our processor, so I didn't have the advantage of using a processor to chop up my veggies, so I just kind of loosely, coarsely chop them. And so what's in here already, you'll see we're starting off really well. It's such a pretty bowl. There's some red bell peppers, which are high in vitamin C. And then I chopped an English cucumber. I did take the seeds out. So I peeled the English cucumber and I scooped out the seeds with my spoon. I sliced it in half, scooped it out, because we don't really want like a wet gazpacho. You know, those seeds will add some moisture to that. We want to take that out. And then a Vidalia onion. I just chopped that in there as well. And then to this, we're going to add some canned tomatoes. So these are some diced and no salt added canned tomatoes. So we're just going to add that right in there. There's our lycopene, right? All chunky. Now, again, you could process those further if you don't want a chunky tomato in your gazpacho. And then we're going to add a little heat too. So these are diced and fire roasted tomatoes along with some green chilies. So this is going to add a little heat too. I love it. Adds like a smokiness. Okay, so that's in there as well. And you'll find these products, like this is actually from Trader Joe's, but most grocery stores have them. You want to show them? I love it. I love it. And then we're going to add some garlic. So I just chopped up some garlic. That's so much fun.
So where are you with do everything you can to buy everything organic versus availability and everything else?
Yeah. Should we buy organic? Do we have to do organic? Like, where do we get these products? I say as much as you can. Sure. Sure, why not? Because we have access to it. I think at least here, we have access to great products and organic products. And I know when the organic market first hit the scene, how expensive it was. But now, because we're buying more of it, the cost is going down, which is really nice. So I think as long as you continue to do that, the experts say it doesn't really matter, right? So yeah, I know that's a shock. It doesn't really matter. I think time will tell that it might, and it might matter more for some individuals than others. So I say, if you can do it, go for it. Yeah, why not, right? And I find organic teas better, especially.
Surprised me that maybe not as much the fruit and vegetable itself, but maybe not so much what's in it, but what's not in it when you think about whether it's pesticides or it's surprising me that you said there's no.
It's surprising. I agree. I know you would think, right? But I just think we don't either have the evidence yet, or they don't really know how to measure it, so again, like, I think it makes sense. And if it's important to you, absolutely. Okay, so to this, we're adding some 100% tomato juice. So here's our soup, basically. And I'm supposed to add 4 cups, but I'm just going to kind of look at it. That's how I like to cook. We're just going to see like what that does right there. So that was probably not even a cup, I would say. Depends on how you like, again, your gazpacho. But you see how soupy it is already? I might add a little bit more. We're going to see how this comes out. Lots of lycopene happening here.
I can actually stop the recording if you want and do let people on mute.
That might be a good idea. Yeah, in case anyone else has questions or comments. We're gonna stop the recording so everyone can participate. I want to make sure I hear your questions and comments and your experience with some of these things. All right, so tomato juice in there, and then we're gonna add 4 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, a little punch.